Joining us now, a central figure in the last impeachment hearings, Connecticut Democratic Congressman Jim Himes. Congressman, your reaction to the president being banned from Twitter, and frankly, do you think this week's insurrection could have been avoided if Twitter had maybe taken the step before?
I have a very mixed reaction to the president being removed from Twitter. Anderson, it's not being talked about enough, but in addition to accountability for what the president has done, there is a lot of thought being put into how is there any way to remove him from the Oval Office? This is a man who incited a situation where the presidential line of succession, the vice president, the Speaker of the House, the Speaker pro tem of the Senate, were at risk. There appears to have been, we don't know the whole story, but a break in the military chain of command with respect to the deployment of the National Guard. The issues don't get more serious than that, Anderson. And so there's a lot of thought, not exactly about accountability. That's a whole other conversation that will extend for a year. But to answer your question, when I heard that the president's Twitter account had been revoked, I thought, well, that's good. That's one means of not inciting violence. But as your guests were pointing out on the show, how is he psychologically going to react to that? Again, I'm very focused on the fact that this is a man who still is in charge of American nuclear forces. He is still the most powerful man on the planet. And guess what? I bet he's more than a little grumpy right now. So I don't quite know how to think about that. But I do think that it doubles down the importance of thinking about those ways that, low probability that they may be, that could separate this man from the ability to launch a nuclear strike, amongst other things.
Well, it doesn't seem like the 25th Amendment would require Vice President Pence taking action with a majority of the cabinet, I guess, in secret so that the president couldn't fire them first. And then the president would have a chance to essentially, say that he is completely capable of continuing on. Then they would have to kind of counter that. That just seems highly unlikely, correct?
Well, it's all highly unlikely. And yes, of course. And that's, of course, what makes this a very nervous moment. Look, when you wake up to the news and hear that the Speaker of the House, who is not in the military chain of command, is talking to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about safeguards on our nuclear assets, this is not a conversation that I ever imagined that we would be having. So yes, there's no indication that Vice President Pence is going to agree to this. Two cabinet secretaries, and remember, you need a majority of the cabinet in order to exert the authorities under the 25th Amendment. Or, by the way, you can also have a commission. The word commission, though it may take the cabinet out of the calculation, cabinet members like Mike Pompeo, almost inconceivable to imagine that happens. The very word commission, of course, makes you think time and bureaucracy. So you're right. It's a low probability thing, but these stakes are so high that's where an awful lot of attention is this evening.
And if President Trump were to be impeached again in the House, it would, of course, then head to the Senate, where the prospects would be uncertain. There's, frankly, no reason to believe there are enough Republican votes there to convict him. Should that be part of the calculus? Should that be about whether or not the House does it?
Well, again, I think you're right in terms of that as a mechanism for removing the president. I keep coming back to this notion of, his Twitter has been taken away. But yeah, what about the nuclear trigger? You're right. The probability is low. Look, it would take some time in the House, as Dana Bash pointed out, even moving at warp speed. And there's no reason to believe that Mitch McConnell would even reconvene the Senate for a trial prior to the 20th of January. So, when you talk about impeachment, I think you're really, at least again, coming back to this question about can he be taken out of the Oval Office, you're really talking about accountability, which is essential and important. Our country will never get back to normal until people are held to account for their seditious and their violent actions. But you're also talking, and this is my, second observation on how discussion of impeachment is valuable. We haven't talked yet about the possibility that he might be persuaded to resign. That actually that's low probability, but it may be higher probability than these other things. And of course, if a second impeachment is on the table, maybe that conversation is a little bit more probable.
Congressman Jim Himes, I appreciate your time. Thank you.